Have you noticed that software kind of sucks right now? Like, in the most literal sense. When I use Windows, I never know if my computer is going to crash randomly when I open a file. My desktop started having an SSD disconnect randomly. iOS is a total mess. I can't even edit a message until it's verified that it's sent and done a fancy little animation when it's done. I have everything I'm using just crashing constantly. I swear, every time I turn on my PlayStation, I don't actually know if it's going to boot, if it's going to crash, if I'm going to have to format it, or if my controller won't connect because it needs another firmware update, like the third one this month. What's going on? Why is everything falling apart? I tweeted about this a few days ago because I had a rough day with software. Twitter was not loading when I scrolled. It would just black out a chunk of the screen. iOS was bugging me constantly. My Uber trips would disappear right after I booked them. I still can't get picture-in-picture working properly for YouTube. It just freezes the video. The audio keeps playing at least, but like, what? How is that a problem that's existed for months now? And the cursor agents failing randomly. Thankfully, the cursor team's on top of it. But like, that was all like a few hours. I feel like I'm watching the software world crumble in front of me, and it's getting terrifying because software is important for a lot of the things I do. And I have not really talked about this part of it. I haven't talked about this slow spiral of enshittification and things just falling apart until now. I'm tired, I'm frustrated, and I want to complain a bit. But I have one thing I don't want to complain about, which is today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is a database that's so incredibly flexible that it's changed how I build. Much like their flexibility with data management, they're also quite flexible with how I do these ads, so I'm going to not mention them for a bit and talk about the shirt I'm wearing. This is the Pioneer Way shirt from Y Combinator. I got this one at the most recent Alumni Demo Day event. Alumni Demo Day is an awesome opportunity for existing founders to come meet the new ones as they're presenting the things they're building. And I noticed a trend. Historically, a lot of these companies have used the databases that came from Y Combinator. There's one particularly popular green one that people really like that has not been the best solution for a lot of these Y Combinator companies. I spent far too much time talking about data management with all of the companies in the current batch and ended up just pulling out my laptop and demoing today's sponsor, Convex. I shit you not, after doing like a 10 to 15 minute here's why I like Convex pitch to a handful of founders, one in particular just kept asking more and more questions because he was so curious about it. I got a text at 5 a.m. the next day. Hey Theo, I stayed up all night because I was so nerd sniped by Convex. It solved all of the problems we were having and I just stayed up porting to it. The port went live and I couldn't be happier. Thank you for taking the time to explain it to me. If you want to better understand all the reasons why I love Convex, feel free to check out any of the like 12 or so videos I've done because I thought it was too good to be true and also thought that it wasn't really going to be good at all. Eventually, after the founders, Tanner Lindsley, and web dev Cody all independently took time to try and convince me to give it another shot, I did. And within a month, I had ported all of T3 chat over. There's a reason that everybody who looks at Convex ends up falling for Convex, and it's really hard to convey in 2 minutes. So what I'm going to convey instead is that it happened to me, it's happening to all my friends around me, and it really should happen to you too. Stop building databases like it's the 1980s. Build something modern that lives in your code base today at soydev.link/convex. So what is going so wrong? Why does so much software suck to use right now? I'm going to start by going in a slightly different direction. What are some programs and some pieces of software that don't hurt me every time I have to touch them? I wish I could put T3 chat here, but we've had enough bugs recently. I don't feel good doing it. We're working on it. We have some really cool stuff coming that should smooth it out. But my examples are going to be a bit different than y'all might think. Ghosty is a great one. If you're not familiar, Ghosty is my terminal written in Zig by the creator of all of the cool Terraform stuff over at HashiCorp. He left, and this has been his new pet project. Another weird one, Lossless Cut. If you're not familiar, it's a huge part of how we do our content on this channel. It's an open source video editing software that is apparently sponsored by Warp, which is cool. It's a very simple, not necessarily the prettiest looking app that lets you losslessly cut pieces out of a video. So if you want to chop a few segments and save them and then have them to use for other things, it makes life much easier. We use this a ton for my content pipeline. Whenever I'm done streaming, I take the VOD, I drop it in Lossless Cut. I take a CSV that I make for my website, Marker Thing, that takes all the topics I cover and puts them in timestamp formats, drop that in Lossless Cut, hit export, and it just does the thing. It's incredible. It makes our lives much easier, and it just fucking works. The one or two bugs I've had with it were because of Windows file system changes, and the maintainer, as soon as he saw them, had to fix up within hours. I donated a bunch of money to them because I was really pumped. Miffy is incredible, and I'm very thankful that he is working as hard as he is to make something this good. Another I've been enjoying a lot is Helium. Also Zen, to be fair, but I found Helium to be a surprisingly not buggy experience. The first couple releases had their issues. Believe me, I complained a lot to the team, but they've been resolved for the most part. Just yesterday, I had a bug that I was convinced was Helium, where when I used my hotkeys through, I use Rectangle for my window management hotkeys. Control Option left and right does split views, and then Enter does full screen. Whenever I did this, I'd get a little error popping up saying the window can't be focused. And I was convinced that the update I had just done on Helium was the cause of it. So I went and I flamed Wacko for it. Wacko had no idea what could have possibly changed, so I decided to reboot my computer and see. And I couldn't reboot because there was some weird app or some thing that had happened to maybe Helium that was keeping it from being able to boot or focus or really use my computer. Hard reboot later by holding down the power button and everything is fine. Because the bug was not Helium, the bug was macOS, because this platform is fucking crumbling. Not only is macOS slowly falling apart, I actually learned earlier today that they cut the bug bounty payouts for security research on macOS by over 75%. So if you do find issues in macOS, in particular security issues, you're going to be paid significantly less than you used to be, despite the fact that Apple's a multi-trillion-dollar company with a shitload of money in the bank. Yeah, iOS and macOS were like the two stable things in my life, and they're going to shit too. Here's a fun one I had yesterday on my iPhone, the one device that used to be stable. Watch the top bar when I unlock the phone. Do you see that? Do you see how it stayed in the blur state? I unlocked my phone, and the top nav went blurry. And I could open up Control Sensor to make it unblurry temporarily, and then it would re-blur itself. I had to reboot my phone to fix this. That's some Android shit. We're not talking about the bad things. We're supposed to be focused on the good ones. So Ghosty, Lossless Cut, and Helium are the first things that come to mind when I'm trying to think of software that is stable and reliable and making my life better. I really sat here trying to think of other things that are good enough to hit my bar here. Chad even gave a bunch of suggestions, and none of those quite met my bar either. It's kind of tough out there. So what do these projects have in common that aren't the case for other things that might be part of why I'm having a much better experience with them? Let's start with Ghosty. It's open source. It's mostly one dude. It's a passion project, and the dude is already wealthy. He has made his money elsewhere. Lossless Cut. Open source. Mostly one dude. Passion project. Deserves more money. That's why I donated, and if you're interested in Lossless Cut, you should too. Helium. Open source. Mostly two dudes. Passion project. Deserves more money. Huh. Interesting. Weird. That's a lot of things they have in common. Now, I see chat suggesting other things right here, like their native apps. No, they're not. Ghosty's written in Zig, and he had to do a ton of crazy shit to make that work. Lossless Cut's an Electron app. It's hilarious how good it is, but it is Electron. And Helium. Oh, Helium. The repo, a bunch of patch files on Chromium. Yes, it's patches all the way down. The composition of these projects on a technical level couldn't be more different. Another thing that couldn't be more different is the way they all use AI. They vary wildly in how much the maintainers use, and support the use of AI stuff in their development work. The reason I wanted to highlight this distinction is because a lot of people are thinking that this column is the reason we have problems. And I want to tell all of you to shut the fuck up because you have no idea what you're talking about. Two of the three projects here are heavily based on Chromium. One is Electron-based, and the other is a bunch of patches on Chromium. Zig's really cool too, but the point of Ghost isn't to be the best possible experience with all the features, or even the prettiest UI. Is to be really fast and local, and also is an experiment by the author who was curious about Zig and wanted to explore it in this way. You'll also notice something else about this list. None of these are Rust-based. So if you think switching to the right native language is going to solve all your problems, you're delusional. Go a step further. None of these use Swift UI either. I am so fucking tired of the SwiftUI brain rot. Swift seems like a fine language. SwiftUI seems like a fucking disaster that Apple doesn't know what to do about. If you have a list with enough things in a SwiftUI project, that list will make the app barely perform. One of the reasons I had to move off of Arc is because I had too many files in my download folder. And when you had too many files in their rudimentary SwiftUI list, it would crash the browser. Someone mentioned Flutter in chat, but we're talking about software, not hopes and dreams. The technology that you use to build your project does not determine the stability of the project in any way, shape, or form. Rust makes it more likely that your project is stable. Part of that is because Rust as a language makes it easier to do that, but the bigger part of that is because Rust, the community, and Rust, the people who pick the language, are much more likely to write software in that way. If you care enough to pick Rust, you probably care enough to write stable software, and good stuff. Thank you for doing that. But that doesn't mean Rust is the solution to our software quality problems. You cannot take an unmotivated developer, hand them better tools, and get meaningfully better software. The problem has almost nothing to do with the tooling being used. If you're listening to people who are out here saying everything sucks because Electron, because React, because JavaScript is too easy and everybody's learning it, because y'all need to start using Rust, that person doesn't understand anything that's going on, and they're using the state of software to get gripes out that they personally have. I wish I could sit here and blame SwiftUI and Flutter for all the problems in software. There are problems that those things specifically cause, but those aren't why my phone sucks to use right now. SwiftUI is not why iOS 26 is garbage. And now for the next suggestion, the reason most people think this is happening. Artificial intelligence. Almost every time I hear people talk about enshittification, they say this is because nobody is reading the outputs of their AI-generated software, and it's the AI causing the problems. No, it's not. You might remember that massive Cloudflare outage that happened in November. Here are some fun facts about that outage. It was caused by code that happened to be written in Rust. A lot of people who aren't very intelligent, and a handful that aren't even developers, tried to blame Rust for this. Rust is not why this happened. Unwrap is why this happened. Each module running in our proxy server had a number of limits in place to avoid unbound memory consumption and to pre-allocate memory as a performance optimization. In this specific instance, the bot management system has a limit on the number of machine learning features that can be used at runtime. Currently, the limit's set to 200, which is well above the current use of 60 features. Limit exists for performance reasons. When a bad file that had more than 200 features propagated on the servers, the limit was hit, which would result in system panicking. The FL2 Rust code that makes the check and was the source of the unhandled error is shown below. This unwrap call would cause a panic because too much memory would be used, is my understanding. And this unwrap would result with an error value that was unexpected and unhandled here. This is the thing that propagated that caused everything to go down. This code was not generated by AI. It was written and read and reviewed by humans, and no human had any issue with it. And it was written in Rust, which should magically solve all these problems, right? This is one of the biggest outages that has ever occurred in the history of the internet, and it did all of the things that people bitching about enshittification say that you should do. They didn't write it with AI, and they were using Rust, a memory-safe language. You would think this type of thing wouldn't happen when you do all of that, right? Right? No. Lots of other things feed into and out of this, but there is one thing that is actually causing the problems that we're experiencing. Software is getting more complex. The expectations users have of their software go up constantly. The size of the projects that people are contributing to are growing rapidly. AI does play into this because it makes it easier to make your project bigger. Technology choices play into this because when you switch technologies, you're probably going to double the size of your code base because you're going to use the new one, but also maintain the old one because you're not quite feature pair yet, and now you have way more code. The economic incentives that exist across these businesses are also driving this really hard. When one company releases a new feature and their competitors don't have it yet, all those competitors rush to add it in, and they often don't do it well. It's a silly feature, but when branching was introduced as a thing people wanted in AI chat apps, both OpenAI and Google rushed to add it. In T3 chat, our branching works pretty well. I click branch, I click the model I want to branch with, and now I have my branch. I have my little branch icon that I can click to go back to the original. Nice, simple, reliable. And what's really cool with this implementation is if you branch off of your message, it will regenerate using the message that you're branching to. So if I want to compare how this image gen looks with OG Nano Banana. Go to Gemini, Nano Banana. Now it is generating using the new model. This was not too hard to implement. The team went pretty hard to get it nice and smooth, and I'm pumped with the results of how well it works. But if you compare this with how it works in other places, it's almost funny. Just last month, I was trying ChatGPT. I did a sabbatical, effectively, where I just used ChatGPT for the month to figure out what features and pieces we needed for T3 chat. And holy shit, the branching is so broken. Watch what happened when I tried here. Branch. It opens a new tab with a broken view. That button doesn't show anything. The menu just renders empty. And then when I try doing a follow-up generation, it doesn't have a convo ID because it didn't create the new branched thread properly. And this thread, this branch that I created, literally just doesn't fucking work at all. At all. And don't get me started. I'm not even going to pull up the AI Studio one. Just trust me. However broken you think it is worse. And these companies all rushed it out because people were talking about the feature, and some engineer wanted the feature. And more than ever, the willingness for a company to merge things is high. On one hand, this excites me because when I was at a company like Amazon, when I made a change that was useful and exciting both to me and to many users like me, getting permission to merge it and ship it was hard. But as the size of these projects grows, as the oversight goes down and the desire to keep up goes up, the willingness to merge things does too. The number of PRs being merged in the average project has gone up meaningfully if you limit it to projects that are actually shipping to users. I don't count your vibe-coded bullshit that only you use, if you even use it. I'm talking about real software from real companies. More companies are shipping more software. AI does assist in shipping some amount, but the number of PRs merging is a thing that is constantly going up as the number of employees goes up, as the economic incentives go up, and as the competition gets harder to fight. The desire to ship has never been higher. And you can blame AI for some amount of this. Like, sure, AI does make us move faster, and it is incentivizing the whole industry to accelerate and ship more. But that doesn't excuse certain things from happening. The complexity of the average piece of software we use is going up like mad. The number of lines of code that Gmail was when it first shipped is probably 100 to 1,000 times smaller than it is today. Almost certainly. The amount of layers you have to go through to even find where the bug might be, much less fix it and ship it, is insane. And the incentives to do this type of work are very low. There are way too few incentives for the types of people who want to come in and polish. There is a super low investment in things like QA. Quality assurance is just massively underinvested in. Even when I was at Twitch, the willingness for us to block a release until QA was completed with it was relatively low. Engineering teams and code bases have scaled like mad, even though nothing else has. The amount of QA people, security researchers, and even just engineering managers and people willing to spend time reviewing code, those numbers aren't going up anywhere near as fast as the number of engineers are. Sure, we're having a bit of a layoff culture where like 5% of engineers at some companies are being laid off, but they were doubling the number of engineers every year up until that point. There are too many engineers working on too many things in too many places that we all rely on, and the complexity of these things has gone up a ton. But there's one other really big piece here. Our software stacks haven't changed in a decade. Let's go back to my tweet that kicked all this off. iOS 26 is a buggy mess. I've been using iOS since 2012. My Uber trips disappear after booking. I've been using Uber since 2014. Twitter's blacking out a third of the screen. I've been using Twitter since 2014, and the engineers who built the Twitter app I use every day quit a long time ago. Cursor agents are failing randomly. This is a new piece of software that is different, but also the only reason Cursor could succeed is because it's building into the VS Code ecosystem by forking VS Code. And VS Code has been my editor since 2017. YouTube picture-in-picture video freezing is insane, but I've been watching YouTube for almost 20 years. The software I'm talking about here either is over 10 years old or is built on top of software that is over 10 years old. The trenches have never been deeper. The things that we use every day, the things that we're complaining about the bugginess of every day, are pieces of software that we've been relying on for a decade plus. As software gets older, it gets bigger. And as software gets bigger, it gets worse. We've never had an era where the software we rely on every day is the same as the software we relied on 10 years ago. Things normally change much faster than that. We went from Outlook to AOL email to Gmail, and now we've been on Gmail for 20 years. We went from the original Apple software to DOS to Mac OS to Windows to OS X to Windows to Mac OS again. We went from like 500 different mobile platforms to iOS and Android. We went from tons of different social media apps and websites to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. The only newish one there is TikTok. And you know what? TikTok seems a lot more stable than the others. As software gets older, it gets worse. And the software we're using today is very old. I know the hype's all around AI everything. And sure, some of these AI things that we use are new and cool, but a lot of them are built on top of old stuff. It's crazy to think something as essential as like Git was changing constantly before Git. We changed the solution for source control dozens of times before we settled as an industry on Git. There were tons of different operating systems before we settled on Mac, Linux, Windows. There were way too many mobile platforms. There were so many mobile platforms that Java won because Java could work on all the different mobile platforms with a single code base. The problem isn't that the software we're using is made by the wrong people or use the wrong technologies or AI is taking it all over. It's that we've hit a critical mass, a point at which we can't really return from, where the things we use all the time are just too big and have too much shit going on in them, and they're falling apart as a result. And nobody wants to move to a new solution because part of how these things were built was to encapsulate you within them. But there are some places that I'm seeing a lot of progress here. A huge part of why we're stuck on Windows is because of the software that only runs on Windows, which is why things happening in Steam and Valve's ecosystem are so exciting. Things like Proton are huge because they let us use a stable open platform to run software that was previously restricted to Windows. And that software fits a lot of the stuff here, where it's open source, it's a passion project, and it's people who are either already wealthy or are getting money from other sources. Like Valve makes a disgusting amount of money, and they're pouring it into this open stuff because it will let them make software that's more stable on devices and products that they care about. Meanwhile, on the Google side, I'm not even using YouTube chat right now because whenever the YouTube chat is on, it ooms my computer on a browser that Google made. I use a Google browser on a Google Media platform with a Google Stream, and it crashes because the chat code is broken. On one hand, that's a shit culture problem for sure. On the other hand, if YouTube wasn't a bloated mess of code, it would be relatively easy for them to make a good chat. Nobody at YouTube is intentionally making the chat shit. The YouTube chat sucks because the YouTube code base sucks, and there aren't enough engineers allocated to work on this, and even if there were, the code base they're stuck in is a shit show. And then they have to make it work in other places as well. You no longer have to just make your software for one thing. When you make an update for Windows, you have to account for all the new Windows computers being sold, all of the ARM-based Windows computers that now exist, and all the ancient Windows computers that are still getting updates for some reason. When you make a change to YouTube, you're not just making a change to youtube.com, you have to deal with the iOS app, and the Android app, and the Apple TV app, and the Kindle app, and the Amazon Fire TV app, and the Roku app, and the Roku ecosystem's a fucking disaster. One of the worst things I've ever had to touch. Your software now lives in more places, which means it's harder to fix, maintain, and change. Your software is now much bigger, which means it's harder to fix, maintain, and change. Your teams are now much larger, which makes it harder to fix, maintain, and change. Notice how none of this has anything to do with AI, Rust, memory-safe languages, Electron, or any of the things most people are bitching about. Nothing gets better if we start using Rust more. Nothing gets better if we stop using AI to help us with the code. Things only get better if we start diversifying our software stack more and taking more opportunities to adopt things built by passionate individuals instead of staying on the things built by these giant companies on rotting code bases. AI isn't going to save us here, but it's not the cause of the problem either. And it seems like everybody is on one or the other side here, where either AI is the reason this is happening or AI is going to keep this from happening. One of the few people I see who seems to get this is actually Dax, specifically this tweet. He made 2 points here that people struggle to understand both. You either believe one or the other, but it's rare people see both. And even Prime tries to say that the two are feeding into each other. The first point is that software quality is pretty bad and we need to make it better. And the second is that there's so much software that needs to be built, making it more accessible with higher level languages, frameworks, AI services, etc. is a good thing. And very few people can accept that these are two true statements. I couldn't agree with this more. That all said, a lot of people are blaming software accessibility for things going to shit. Spoiler alert, software getting easier to write is not why iOS 26 is garbage. They weren't even allowed to use good AI models at Apple until very recently. iOS 26 wasn't written with AI or higher level APIs. iOS 26 was an attempt to rewrite the user layer on top of a gigantic old rotting operating system. The problem with iOS 26 has nothing to do with the tech choices. It has nothing to do with the engineers they hired. It has nothing to do with AI at all. iOS 26 sucks because it's the first time they did a big overhaul like that on top of iOS 18 or anything even vaguely close to that new. The iOS 7 release was blamed for a lot of problems when it happened, and the code base they were building on top of was probably 1,000th the size of iOS today. Apparently, the iOS 7 operating system installed size was 2.5 gigs. iOS 26.1 is almost 13 gigs. Do you understand? 2.5 gigs, 12.7 to 14. iOS was under a gig before iOS 7. The problem has nothing to fucking do with AI. Anybody saying that is being dishonest or is just being fucking stupid. The problem here is that the stuff we use is massive now. The sizes of the code bases for the software that we rely on has been going up exponentially for a decade, and since we haven't changed the software we use for a decade, maybe you hop between one of the two major options. No one's trying a new mobile OS. You might move from Android to iPhone and iPhone to Android, but you're not trying a new third option. Nobody's using a new desktop OS. You might try a new flavor of Linux every once in a while, and that flavor might just be a bunch of bash scripts you're running on top of another flavor. No one's using new operating systems. Nobody's using new software. Nobody's using new fucking anything. We're all building on top of the same shit that we used 10 years ago. And if you look at the tech I use today and compare it to what I used 10 years ago, there's barely any difference in the things I choose to use. But the things I'm using are now way bigger than they've ever been. And as a result, they are way less stable than they've ever been. This is why software has gone to shit. And anybody who says anything else is trying to sell you something or trying to justify their own existence. Software has gotten old. As such, it has gotten big, and as it gets big, it gets worse. It really is that simple, and I don't really know how we solve it other than to start using newer, smaller things that are way more limited in what they can do because they're going to be more stable. Programs that do everything that have existed for 10 years will never be as stable as an adequately obsessed 1 to 3 person team building the thing out of a passion for it. Support more independent software. Use more things made by independent, passionate people built to solve problems that they actually have, and keep yelling at Apple until they do a couple more OS updates that are focused entirely on patching. I don't know what else we could do here. That's all I got on this one. I'm sorry your software is shit, and I'm sorry mine is too. Hopefully in the future, things will start to get better. But until then, every time we do an update, we're making our things more bloated, and they're going to keep getting worse. I have a feeling it's going to get much worse before we start to see it get any better at all. Let me know how y'all feel about this, and I'm sure the comments aren't a flame war at all here. Have fun with that, and until next time, peace nerds.